Daryl Davis is many things. He's a musician, an author, an actor. He's also a force for change. I first heard Daryl on National Public Radio in an interview that just blew me away. I've read his book called Clandestine Relationships and highly recommend you check it out. It's the story of his years as a musician. He made a connection with some members of the Ku Klux Klan, and rather than turn away, he turned toward creating friendships. I'm so personally pleased to welcome Daryl Davis. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have to confess, you made me cry.
Cry? How did it come all this way to make you cry?
I read your book, and it's not in my DNA very much to cry at things, but there are so many moments in your book that just struck me so deeply. The fact that you would pause and turn toward those who ostensibly were so filled with hatred toward you. And the thing that struck me was what I imagine was the incredible sense of courage it took to initiate such conversations and to maintain friendships with people.
Well, you know, I gotta be honest with you, it wasn't so much courage as it was curiosity, because I couldn't quite get my head around, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? All you see is this. That's all you know about me, and yet you're gonna hate me. So it was more curiosity.
So you actually grew up outside this culture.
I'm from Chicago originally. I live in Maryland now, right outside of Washington, D.C. But my parents were in the Foreign Service. So I spent a lot of time as an American Embassy brat, traveling around the world with my dad and my mom. And then today, as a professional musician myself, combining my travels with those of a child, I've been in 53 different countries on 6 continents. So I've seen a lot of different cultures, religions, races, etc. And all of that has helped shape who I've become. So I just viewed the Klan, black supremacists, white supremacists, as just another culture.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you first came in contact and what that was like?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, 1983, I got my degree in music, and I've been playing full-time ever since 1980. In 1983 in this country, country music had made a resurgence. There had been a movie out called Urban Cowboy, had the mechanical bull and all the line dances. So, you know, if you want to make a living playing music, which I did, you had to join a country band, because all the bars had switched from disco and top 40 to country. So I joined the country band, and country music and blues music are the same. They're kissing cousins, same 3 chords. So I loved country music, and I could play it. So I joined this country band. I was the only black guy in the band, and consequently, usually the only black guy in many of the places where we went. So we played this truck stop in a place called Frederick, Maryland, called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge was an all-white lounge. And by that I mean, not that blacks were not allowed to go in there. Blacks did not go in there. And that was by their own choice. And that was usually a very good choice, because they were not welcome. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge, only black guy in the place. And my first time in there, the band had been there before. So I came off the bandstand after the first set, and I'm walking across the dance floor to sit with my bandmates. And this white gentleman gets up from his table. He's probably in his mid to late 40s, walks across the dance floor, puts his arm around my shoulder. And I stopped and turned around to see who's touching me. And he says, "I really like your all's music." I said, "Thank you, sir. Appreciate it." Shook his hand. He says, "You know, I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where'd you come from?" I said, "Well, I just joined the band, a couple months ago. It's my first time here." He says, "Well, man, I really like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Now, I was kind of taken aback. I wasn't offended, but I was naive. I'm thinking, he's never heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis? And I wasn't trying to be facetious. And I said, "Well, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play?" And he says, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, Jerry Lee got that style from the same place I did, from black blues and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where that rock and roll rockabilly came from. Oh, no, 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 Jerry Lee invented that. I said, no, he didn't. We argued back and forth. I told the man that I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him since I was 13 years old. He's told me himself where he learned how to play. The guy didn't buy it. He didn't buy that I knew Jerry Lee. He didn't buy that Jerry Lee learned anything from black people. But he wanted to buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink, but I agreed to go back to his table and have a cranberry juice. So I go back, the waitress brings my cranberry juice. The guy takes his glass and he clinks mine, cheers me, and he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. So the first thing that occurs to me is, this gentleman is having a night of firsts. How is it? I mean, seriously, how is it that in 1983, I was 25 years old. How is it in my 25 years on the face of this earth, I had sat down with literally thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. This guy was in his 40s. He never sat down with a black guy before. And I know that there are black people in Frederick, Maryland. I know that for a fact because I've seen them. So how did he miss them? And I asked him, I said, why? And he didn't answer me. I kept saying, why? And finally he just said, plain as day, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I burst out laughing because I didn't believe him. I know a lot about the Klan, and I did not believe him. So he went inside his pocket, put out his wallet, and handed me his Klan card. I looked at this thing. I recognized the Ku Klux Klan insignia, the red circle, the white cross, and red blood drop, and all this other stuff. I'm like, whoa, this thing is for real. So I stopped laughing at that point, right? And I gave it back, and now I'm wondering, why am I sitting here with a Klansman, right? So, but we talked about the Klan and some other things, and he gave me his phone number, and he wanted me to call him anytime I was to come back to the Silver Dollar Lounge, because he wanted to bring his buddies, you understand, to see this black guy play piano like Jerry Lee. And I would call him every 6 weeks on a Wednesday or a Thursday and say, hey man, I'm gonna be at the Silver Dollar, Friday and Saturday, come on up. He'd come, and his Klansmen and Klanswomen would come, and they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play with the band. And then when I'd come off, some of them would want to meet me, others were kind of standoffish, didn't want to communicate with me, so they'd back away and watch me from afar. And this went on until the end of '83, at which time I quit the band, and I went back to playing rock and roll and blues, and my degree is in jazz. So I lost contact with the Klan. It wasn't like, I had a day off, and I went to Frederick and hang out with the Klan, But some years later, I decided I wanted to write a book, because I'd had a lot of, racism experiences, and I thought, I'm going to call that Klansman and get him to fix me up with the leader of the Klan. A state leader of the Klan is known as the Grand Dragon. Okay, we would call the state leader the governor, all right? And then the national leader of the Klan, who oversees all the states in which you have a chapter of your Klan group, we would call a national leader the president. They call theirs the Imperial Wizard. So this guy, Mr. Kelly, was the Grand Dragon of the state of Maryland. I wanted this guy that I met in the bar to fix me up with Mr. Kelly. And I contacted him, and he didn't want to do it. He liked me, but he was fearful that if he were to take a black man to this Grand Dragon, we'd both be in trouble. Well, I persuaded him to give me Mr. Kelly's home address and phone number. And he finally gave it to me after 20 minutes of my begging, on the condition that I not reveal to Mr. Kelly where I got it. I said, okay. So he said, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you. And he gave me that warning. I appreciated it. And then I had my secretary call Mr. Kelly and set up an interview. I told her, do not tell him that I'm black. If he agrees to do the interview, he'll figure that out when he sees me. So she called him, and he didn't ask what color I was. He agreed to do the interview. And so we did this interview, and it went rather well. There was one little mishap. He came with his bodyguard, which is known as a Grand Nighthawk. And anybody who's prefixed with the word grand, that means state leader. Anybody who's prefixed with the word imperial means they are a national officer. So the Grand Nighthawk came with him, and the Grand Nighthawk was wearing military camouflage fatigues with the Ku Klux Klan blood drop emblem right here, the red circle, white cross, blood drop, KKK right here, On his beret, it said, embroidered, was Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And right here, he had a gun. Well, Mr. Kelly came in to the hotel. We did this inside a hotel room. Like I said, he had no idea I was black. And when the bodyguard walked in, he saw me and just froze. And Mr. Kelly was walking behind him in a dark blue suit. And he didn't realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short. He bumped into him, and they stumbled and tripped and had to get their balance. And they're looking all around the room like, something's not right here. Well, I knew what was not right. They're looking for a white guy, to interview him. And so I got up and I walked over. I put my hands out like this, like you can see I had nothing in my hands. I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis." He shook my hand. So far, so good. Nighthawk shook my hand. So come on in, have a seat. So they sat down, and we got on with this interview. And everything was going fine. I mean, every now and then, we would get loud, but nothing rude or violent, anything like that. And I had a cassette player in the middle of the table to record. And every time I'd reach down into my bag to get a fresh cassette, every time I'd reach like this, the Nighthawk would reach like this, right? And he finally realized there was no threat in the bag, and he relaxed. Well, a little while later, there was kind of a strange noise, and we all jumped. And I flew out of my chair, because Mr. Kelly, if I'm sitting here and you're Mr. Kelly, I came up right out on the table, because I'm going to come across that table. I knew that Mr. Kelly had made this weird noise, and I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that he made it because I didn't make it. So all I could hear in the back of my head was, "Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly. He will kill you." And I was not armed. I knew my secretary was not armed. The only person that I knew for sure who was armed was the Nighthawk. I could see his gun in his holster. I didn't know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon under his clothing or not. But I'd gone into survival mode. I feared for my life. And I came up out of the chair. I was going to come across that table, snatch Mr. Kelly, snatch the Nighthawk, and slam them both down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun. Because, when you go into that kind of survival mode, you're left with three options. Either you're terrified and you freeze, you don't know which way to go, or you try to run away. Well, there's no running away inside a hotel room, or you go on the attack. And I didn't want to get shot. I didn't want my secretary to get shot. So I was doing what I felt I needed to do. But I stopped short, because I came up, my eyes met with his eyes. And I didn't say a word to him, but I knew that he could read my eyes, because my eyes were speaking loud and clear. In fact, my eyes were shouting that he could hear my eyes. My eyes were asking him, "What did you just do?" And his eyes had locked with mine. And it was almost like telepathy, because he didn't say a word, but I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the Nighthawk, he's like this, looking at both of us like, "What did either one of y'all just do?" Right? Well, Mary, my secretary, realized what happened. There was a bucket of ice and cans of soda sitting on the dresser. The ice in the bucket melted, and the cans of soda shifted. And then it made that same noise again, and we all began laughing at how ignorant we had been. All right? There was a lesson that was taught. I can't say it was learned that day, but it was taught that day. And the lesson being this: all because some foreign, and I want you to underscore or circle the word foreign, all because of some foreign entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice and cans of soda, entered into our little comfort zone without our knowledge, we became fearful of each other and accusatory. The lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear will breed hatred. If you don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred will breed destruction, because we want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. So that was the lesson that was taught that day, right? And then, like I said, we all laughed and we carried on the conversation. And I went around the country interviewing different Klan people, up north, down south, Midwest, West, etc. And I would keep in contact with those who would talk with me. Some refused to talk with me, all right? Over time, these people would begin questioning me, because at first, when I would interview them, they had no questions for me, because I had nothing to offer them. I was inferior. They had all the answers, so they don't need to hear anything from me. So that, but over time, they began saying, "So Daryl, what do you think about I knew something had happened. All of a sudden, my opinion is of value to you? You want to know my opinion on what I think? And so that would expand the conversation. One thing that I learned very important is this. No matter what kind of opposition you have, it doesn't have to be about race, it could be about take race out of it. If you have an adversary, say you believe on one side of the abortion table, or the war in Iraq, or nuclear weapons, or the environment, whatever controversial subject is out there, let your opponent have a platform. Give him or her the opportunity to air their views, regardless of how extreme they may be. They may be so extreme it cut you to the bone. And believe me, I've been to some Klan rallies where I've heard things that have cut me to the bone. All right? But give that person a platform. If you go along with what they're saying, they convince you, then great, no problem. If they don't convince you, then say to them, look, give me a little more explanation. I need some more clarification as to why you think I should believe this way. And when you do things like that, there's a great chance that they will reciprocate and give you a platform to explain your point of view. You make sure you've done your homework, so you have all your facts together, and you can present your platform in an intelligent and influential manner. Because at the end of the day, you each have to think about what the other person said. If somebody says something to you that creates a little spark, you think, she does have a point. You're going to begin to shift in that direction, because nobody wants to be wrong. We all want to be right. You have people who are ignorant, and you have people who are stupid. All right? Some people define ignorance and stupidity as being synonymous. I don't. To me, an ignorant person is someone who makes the wrong choice or incorrect decision because he or she does not have the proper facts to make the right choice. If you give that person the proper facts and information, they can make the right choice, and you have alleviated their ignorance. A stupid person is someone who has the facts, who has the proper information, and they still make the wrong choice. So if I paint a room and all the walls are wet, and I don't post any signs saying stay off the walls, wet paint, anybody entering that room is ignorant to the fact that the walls are wet. And they might come and lean up against the wall and get paint on their clothes. So I can alleviate that ignorance by putting up signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. I can stand in the doorway, tell each person coming in, hey, keep away from the walls, I just painted them 20 minutes ago, they're still wet. So now everybody has the proper information to make the right choice. But if I do all that, and somebody comes in and goes and leans up against the wall and then wonders why he has paint on his clothes, it's because he's stupid. All right? He had the facts, he had the proper information, and he chose not to use it. Fortunately, there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education. Unfortunately, there is no cure for stupidity. If you give somebody the education and they choose not to use it, there's nothing you can do. The most important thing that I learned in this whole thing was this. While two enemies are talking, they're not fighting. Very important. When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting. They may be yelling and disagreeing, perhaps getting a little loud, but that's okay. Because as long as they're communicating verbally, they're not fighting. It's when the talking ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you always want to keep the lines of communication open. And I'll tell you something that I was very disappointed in a couple months ago when we all saw the footage of our troops going over to, I forgot, it was Iraq or Afghanistan, where the captors were releasing Bergdahl. And if you remember, the helicopter landed, our troops went up there, shook hands with the captors, took Bergdahl and left. The captors said they wanted to talk. They were hoping that the US troops would stay there and talk with them. That was a great opportunity to exchange information. Because at the end of the day, you find out, even with your worst enemy, you have more in common with that person than you do in contrast. That's why you want to keep the lines of communication open. We could have perhaps solved a lot of issues right there, because maybe they want the same thing we want. And when they realize we want the same thing, it breaks the ice. It breaks down barriers. So because I kept that line of communication open with Roger Kelly, he was the Grand Dragon of Maryland. A couple years later, You know, he told me he didn't like me, all right? But yet he would come down to my house. I would invite him down to my house. He would travel an hour and a half to my house with his Nighthawk, who would sit on my couch and twirl his gun on his finger while Mr. Kelly and I would talk. Sometimes I would invite over some of my Jewish friends, some of my white friends, some of my other black friends, just to engage Mr. Kelly in conversation with somebody other than me, all right? And this went on for 2 years. He would eat dinner at my table with me, even though he didn't like me. Okay, he was a Grand Dragon, head of the state of Maryland, Ku Klux Klan. After 2 years, he began coming down by himself without the Nighthawk. He trusted me that much. After 2 years, he was promoted to national leader, Imperial Wizard, all right? He began inviting me to his house. I would go to his house, I would see his Klan den, where he would have his meetings. I took some more notes from my book. He invited me to Klan rallies. I'd go to these Klan rallies, watch them parade around in their robes and hoods, and set this big cross on fire and proclaim white supremacy and white power and this, that, and the other. I take some more notes. But we kept those lines of communication open. And eventually, he began to shift. And then a few years ago, Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan. Today, he no longer believes in what he preached. And when Mr. Kelly left the Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. Thank you. This is the robe of the Imperial Wizard. And this is the Klan symbol all Klan groups use. It's called a Mayoke or a blood drop emblem. The red circle, the white cross, and red blood drop in the center. And of course, this is the hood. They also call it a helmet. And there's a mask that attaches to the hood, has 3 snaps or Velcro, and members who want anonymity, they don't want you to know who they are, they peep at you through the eyelets. If they don't care that you know who they are, they simply unsnap the mask and pull it off, and the face is exposed under the hood. And I have collected quite a number of robes and hoods. And today, thank you. Now, you know, blue or purple is the color for the imperial level. You can have either a white cotton robe with blue or purple stripes, blue cape, blue sash, or purple, or you can have a satin robe. It would be full blue or full purple. No difference, just your preference between blue and purple or cotton and satin. Green is the color for the grand level. This is a Grand Dragon's robe from another Klan group. It's a white cotton robe with a green cape, green sash, and once again you see the Klan emblem, and over here he has a dragon patch on his robe. This one here is from another Grand Dragon, from another Klan group that became friends with me. He chose satin, so here's his green satin robe. He's got 2 of the blood drop emblems on his robe. Now this guy, when I was 19 years old, he went to prison for conspiring to bomb a synagogue in Baltimore, Maryland. And he ran the Klan from within the prison. And then when he got out, he continued running the Klan. He was a vehement racist, very violent individual. And he continued running the Klan. And then as an adult, later on, I heard on the radio that he got busted again, this time for assault with intent to murder 2 black men with a shotgun. So by the time I started writing this book, he was almost due to get out of prison. And I said, you know, I need to interview that guy. His name was Bob White, Robert White. And so I wrote him a letter in prison and told him I was writing a book on the Klan. Would he consent to letting me interview him? He wrote me back. He was vehemently racist. He didn't know I was black. And he just went on and on about blacks and Jews and how they're destroying the country and on and on. And we kept, you know, this correspondence going. It started in November. And so in December, he sent me a Christmas card. And, you know, that he had drawn himself in prison. And then in January, he writes me this letter, very short letter, and says, we've corresponded several times now. How come you have not told me that you're black? So he had done a little investigation, had some of his people investigate me, and word got back to him. So I wrote him back and said, look, man, what difference does it make whether I'm black or white or anything else? If you're going to tell me the truth is no different if you tell it to a black guy or a white guy, right? And so he says, okay, fine. So we got together, and he was very angry when he came out of prison. But over time, he changed his beliefs. Now, I want to say this because right now we're in a lot of controversy with blacks and the police, as we know, in a certain town down in Missouri. And I know the Klan over there as well. Believe it or not, I've had lunch with that Klan leader there, the one who recently talked about using lethal force. Okay, I know him very well. I don't really have a problem with him. I don't support his beliefs, but he and I get along. Anyway, Bob White. You don't make money being a Klan leader. You have to have a day job. This is only a title. His day job was Baltimore City police officer. He was not a undercover cop in the Klan. He was a Klansman on the police force. Okay, and this is why you have a lot of tension between blacks and the police. There's a lot of history there, so I want to bring that up because that's very currently in the news.
This is a show about, about transformation. And I just want to express for myself, and I think on everyone here, to thank you for the courage.
But before you go, I'm sorry. I just like to say I'm very proud to be in your presence today, my brother. You've enlightened me as well as I know a lot of people in this audience who probably needed to know this as well as I do. I came from North Carolina. I grew up there in Klan country myself. The curiosity that struck you also struck me as a youngster. As I was riding my bike and a white youngster rode up behind me and called me a nigger. The curiosity was in me because I'd never heard that word before. My parents chose not to involve me or to inform me of what was going on around me. But I knew from the tone of his voice there was some hatred. So I tried to catch him to find out what it was, what his intent was behind those words. I couldn't catch him. So I went home that night. I told my grandmother what happened. So she said to me, that's something that you will never be. She left it like that. And I really appreciate her to this day for not sharing that information with me at that young age, because I probably would have gone to grow up with hate in my heart also. But I just appreciate your story and your courage and your opportunities that came upon you in meeting these people and how you handled yourself, and you're just a courageous individual. I just want to tell you that.
Thank you, and I appreciate you, my brother. Thank you very much. And let me just say, I appreciate that very, very much. And I know the Klan leader. Well, he just passed away a couple years ago of North Carolina, and he was a wild man. He would not talk to me, but he and I met. It bothers me a great deal, folks, because there is a lot of strife in this world, and we're under attack by many different places. Some we know, some we don't know, and the best way for an enemy to conquer us is to divide us, divide and conquer. All right, that makes us vulnerable, and we are a very divided nation right now, and it pains me because we call ourselves the greatest nation on the face of this earth. Don't get me wrong. I'm patriotic. I love my country, all right? And perhaps we are the greatest technologically. We've done more than any other country in the world. We have the ability here in our country to put a man on the moon. And while Neil Armstrong is walking around talking about one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, we can talk to him via satellite radio phone, live from Earth all the way to the moon. Everybody in here has email. Everybody in here has a cell phone. Hit a few words, hit a few numbers, hit send, and you're talking to people all over the world. Right next door, or California, Australia, Africa, China, wherever, it doesn't matter, all right? How is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on the face of this earth But yet some of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door to our house because he or she is a different color or religion or persuasion. It seems to me that before we can call ourselves the greatest nation on the face of this earth, our ideology has to catch up to our technology. Okay? And once we get them both up there, then we can truly argue that we are indeed the greatest. Because folks, we are living in the 21st century. We are living in space age times, but there's still too many of us still thinking with Stone Age minds. Thank you. You need to put me on?